G'day guys, just a quick video today. I thought I might share with you a little, commonly known trick to help sharpen up the shift quality in your BTR 4-speed transmissions, and also hopefully with the idea of trying to get them to be able to handle a little bit more power. So for those of you that are not familiar with this car on my channel, this car started out as a NA xr6 Falcon and I converted it to turbo. Currently at this point in time it runs a xr6 turbo motor and an xr6 turbo diff, but it still retains the original NA transmission in it. Now back before I did this conversion on this car, this transmission was already in pretty sad shape to begin with. It worked, but just didn't shift as firmly or quickly as they should, and then adding a turbo on the top of that's only compounded this problem. So now in the third gear it flares massively, and under light sort of throttle applications, first to second, it's just doughy feeling. So the plan for this car obviously at some point very soon is I'm going to rip the transmission out and put something different in it. But for the time being I'm sort of just playing around with ideas of ways to get these NA gearboxes to handle a little bit more power. And I think the biggest thing there is we need to firm up the shifts. So a trick you may have seen mentioned around the forums and stuff over the years is adjusting the S5 solenoid. Now in the BTR transmission there is a solenoid called the S5 solenoid, and its job is for regulating the line pressure to basically adjust shift firmness. So the ECU is constantly regulating that depending on what your throttle position is, etc. Now starting in the AU Falcons, in the back of that solenoid they put a adjustable grub screw, and that basically sets the base pressure of that solenoid. So if you wind that thing in, it means that now the base pressure runs higher, and then the ECU still adjusts the solenoid as normal, but the pressure throughout the whole range is higher. And what this causes is for the car to basically shift harder. Now harder shifts means less slip, more power means more slip, so you want to shift harder, which in theory will help reduce the transmission slipping, which should get it to basically last longer without destroying the clutch backs. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm willing to experiment on this transmission because it's pretty well dead anyway. So I'm going to take now and show you guys. We'll drop the pan off of it and have a look at that solenoid, and I'll show you how to adjust it. Okay, so I've got the car jacked up here, and now we're underneath it and have a look at this transmission. So that's your transmission obviously. Now the first thing you're going to want to do here in my mind is loosen off your drain bung just up here. This is at the back of the transmission on the driver's side, and it's a 16mm hex. Now you're not going to be able to get a socket up there because you'll hit the floor pan. You have to use a spanner, or if you've got some sort of really shallow socket or whatever you can make fit. But make sure it's a good one, because these things are always really tight in my experience, and they like to round off. So what I've got here is I've just got this spanner, and I've got a 16mm socket that fits in it. Don't ask me where I got it, but it seems to work well. So I've already cracked that loose, and now that ensures that once I put the pan back on, I'm going to be able to take it out and fill up the transmission. So next up, you've got to take out these little 10mm bolts around the transmission pan. What I do is I start at the back here, crack them loose, work my way up, and it causes the whole pan to tip down at the back and run all the oil out. Now I've just got down here this big sort of moving tub or packing tub, whatever you want to call it. I think I bought this from a local hardware store, maybe Kmart somewhere, but you just want something that's bigger than the transmission that's going to fit under there, because as soon as you undo this, oil's going to be pouring everywhere. So you need something big enough to catch it. So I'll put the camera down now and we'll crack off this transmission pan, and then we'll take a look at this solenoid. Got my 10mm ratchet. We'll just start at the back of the pan here, just cracking these loose. And there we go, if we get us a bit of a help. And now that's pretty well drained out, I just push the pan back up, and then while I'm holding it, take out the last 2 screws that I've got in, or bolts I've got in here. Now there will still be a bit of oil in this pan, so you don't want to drop it, or you'll have a bad day. And then just lower it down, and you can tip it and get the last bit of oil out. Alright, so now we've got that pan off, we can see up here our valve body and our transmission filter. These all up along here are our solenoids, and there's another one over on the other side there. Now the solenoid we're looking for is the S5 solenoid, which is this one just up here. So to gain access to this little grub screw that I'm talking about, we need to pull this plug off. Now you take basically a little flat blade screwdriver, you need to wedge it up behind this clip and pry the clip out just slightly. Then you can grab the plug and pull it off. Just be real careful, because obviously this is plastic that's been soaked in boiling hot transmission oil all its life, so it's pretty brittle. So don't just go and yank on it, or you'll probably break your plug. So we'll get this off, and then I'll show you this adjustment screw. So now I've got that plug off, we can see the little grub screw that we need to adjust in the back of the S5 solenoid here. To turn this, you need a little T15 Torx head bit, which will reach up there on a bit of an angle, but it does fit. Now you want to wind this one in around half a turn to 3/4 of a turn. It sort of depends on what sort of shift feel you want, and you sort of have to adjust it by the seat of your pants. Obviously, the further you turn it in, the firmer of a shift you're going to get. If you go too far, you'll probably end up chirping tyres and stuff between gears, and I don't know how good or bad that will be for your transmission. But I'm not going for a really hard shift, I just want the transmission to be a bit firmer and quicker shifting, so I'm going to start at half a turn. And if I decide it needs more, I'll drop the pan off and go again. Obviously, this being a sort of tighter transmission that's starting to slip, probably it would be a wise idea to wind it in more, but also I don't know how effective this will be, because I don't know just how much damage is actually in this thing. But either way, I'll start with half a turn, and then we'll put the plug back on, and then we can look at filling up the transmission. So there's the transmission pan back on and the filler bung removed, so I can fill it back up with transmission oil. Now, if this was a decent transmission that you were planning on keeping in your car, it would have been a wise idea to replace that filter in there while you're at it. But that's not the case of this one, so now I've got the pan back on, we can fill it back up with oil. So now I've got that pan back on, I just need to refill the transmission. I'm using here Castrol's TQ95, which is the transmission fluid specifically designed for the BTR 4-speed. Now, if you've got something kicking around like this Dexron 3 here, do not use it. I repeat, just don't put that in there. Even though that says on their Ford, that's for other Ford transmissions and not the BTR, and that stuff kills them. Many people have found that out the hard way. So there are a few other brands of oils now that are making oils that list that they're compatible for the BTR. They're generally a multi-vehicle. Some of them work fine and you can probably use them, but they generally cost the same as this or more. So if you buy an oil, just get that and it'll do the job just fine. So other than that, you're going to need some sort of pump bottle to get it back in there. You're not going to really want to try and, I don't know, jerry rig something with a funnel and a pipe to try and get inside a transmission. You'll make a mess. These are really cheap, it's super cheap. I paid like 38 bucks for it, I think, and it works nicely. Other than that, the service refill capacity on the BTR when you drop the pan is just under 4 litres, so a single bottle will do you fine for this job. So all you really need to do from here is just basically fill this until it starts weeping out of the filler hole here. Now, for those of you with a keen eye, you've probably already realised that this oil going in here doesn't look anywhere as bright red as it should be right now. That's correct. I'm actually using oil that I drained out of my ute on its last service. Now, I'll admit that's a pretty rough thing to do, but at the end of the day, this transmission, like I said earlier, is on its way out, and I don't see any point throwing money at it on new filters and new oil for it when I'm only going to pull it out of the car very shortly anyway. And what I'm doing here realistically is just me experimenting, figuring out what adjustments I want to get what shift firmness before I put the new transmission in. So anyway, we'll keep filling this one up until it starts weeping out that hole, and then I'll show you what to do next. You'll see now there's fluid starting to run out of that hole. So I'll just whack that bung back in there, finger tight for now will do. So the next thing you want to actually do is just start the car up quickly and cycle it through, reverse and drive a few times. So you might find at first it may even hesitate to go in the gear because it hasn't sucked all the oil back up through the pump and everything. And now we've done that, we'll go and recheck that oil level. So now we've started the car up and cycled it through its gears and everything. You want to pull the bung back out and check the level. And it's most likely dropped below where it was before. This may not be as bad for me this time because I didn't pull the filter out when I did this. But we'll see. There we go, so we'll see there where it was running fluid out earlier. Now it's stopped, so we need to top it up again to that hole. So this time now you're going to want to actually tighten that up with the spanner properly. Just go snug on it, don't need to go too ridiculous because then you'll just have a really hard time pulling it out in the future, and that O-ring on it is what's responsible for sealing it. So that's all we got to do now, tighten that up, clean off your sump pan, anything, any oil that's on it, and then you can lower the car off the jacks and take it for a test drive. Apologies for the neighbour's dog barking in the last part of the video there. Now that we've got that pan back on though, and I've double checked that level, the only step left to do from here is you want to take the car for a quick lap around the block. Don't drive it long, maybe 5 minutes, and then bring it back in the shed, jack it up, and just feel the transmission pan. It should be sort of just warm, not hot. And then you want to pull that bung back out again with the car off and just check the fluid level one last time. It'll probably run out at that point in time, but that's the final check for it to make sure it's at the right level. There's a few different ways I've seen people say that you should check the fluid level on the BTRs. That's how I've always done it, and I've never had an issue doing it that way. So yeah, I'll go take the car for a quick drive now, check that fluid level again, and then we can give it a proper test and see how effective that solenoid mod has been. So there we go, I'm back from a quick test drive and I can say that's worked out really well. So as I said earlier, this transmission in this car is not in the best of order and it's been starting to flare quite a lot when shifting the third gear lately, and all other gears just feel overall doughy. Now after doing this little modification to it, the transmission shifts nice and firm. It's a good positive shift into all gears, but it's not at all harsh, it just feels nice and it doesn't slip at all no matter what I do to it now. So from the little bit of footage that I showed of it driving, I had a look at it before and it just looks like a BTR shifting normally. It's really hard to sort of convey that over video, but I can say that when you're sitting in the car, the shift has got a nice defined positive feel to it. Now if this is how much of an effect it's had on a gearbox that was slipping to begin with, I think it would only be better again on a transmission that's in a good state to start with. And overall, if you're trying to make an NA gearbox work in one of these cars, or even a turbo box for that matter, I think it's probably something wise and worthwhile looking into. Now, I don't know long term if this is going to have some other kind of effect on the transmission, but it's no secret that these BTR 4-speeds in their stock form are not a very strong gearbox, and anything much more than stock power out of a turbo motor is too much for them, and they pretty quickly start slipping and having issues. So in my mind, anything we can do to try and help them and prolong their life a little bit longer is a good thing. So anyway, if you're someone who's seen this S5 solenoid mod mentioned somewhere before and you've wondered how to do it, this now shows you. Or if you're trying to make an old NA transmission hang on to a little bit more power, this is something worthwhile for you to help, and it's a free modification rather than buying an electronic shift kit, for example. So with that, I hope the video's helped you. See you guys in the next one.